Hello and welcome to the next episode of H. Paul Models. This edition I'm going to be building an Airfix 172 Lancaster. Bit of a project, but I'm looking forward to it. Not wishing for the sympathy vote, I was recently diagnosed with prostate cancer and one of my colleagues bought me this to get me through the treatments, whatnot, distraction from what is going to go on. So yeah, this build I'm going to try and do as much justice as possible. So I'm going to introduce LEDs, I'm going to get the props to turn, and I'm going to do my utmost to give it a full crew as well. So please join me in this build. Some of the editing might be a bit iffy, I do apologise for that, but it does get better as the video goes on.
Distractions are up. A couple of the sprues are up. I didn't expect it to be this big. This is going to be epic. So, yeah, the board's clear and all of a sudden a bit too inadequate. So let's crack on.
Oh my goodness. I have to see if I can look it out. It doesn't go with the carpet monster. It's definitely in there, it's just not coming out now. It's the last one as well, always is, isn't it? Before it has any more arguments, let's just give it a blob. And that will do. Started doing the interior detail on this, fitting the pilots and all the other stuff, and I think it would be a shame to close the model up and essentially lose it all. So I'm thinking about adding lights, perhaps an LED under the pilot, an LED somewhere under the navigator's desk, and I'd like to do one in the turrets as well. So I'm going to play with this for a while and see what I can light. Should be interesting. Red LEDs, very small, matching up to my tool. Diameter's about right, marvellous. So on leads, it's a long leg that's positive, so I'm just going to test these first before I make the effort of putting them into the model, because there's nothing worse than doing all the wiring and all the cutting and all the fitting and then they don't work. I can't explain how. I've done it a couple of times and it's frustrating, it really is. So I've learnt my lesson, and yeah, it's all good. Obviously once they're in the model, and if they fail, that's unfortunate, but not testing before you fit is a bit daft. So luckily the Bombay has got these grid things in them, so that'd be really handy for a pilot hole. So under the pilot I'm going to put one there, so I think about there. Now the kit didn't come with bombs, so I'm going to have the Bombay doors shut, so I can do all the wiring in the Bombay, which has been brilliant. There we go, we're through gently. Oh, I don't want to do any more. That's going to hit the pilot, so I'll just open it slightly. Shut that off. LED slots straight in beautifully, so that'll light under the pilot and will hopefully glow up. Because I've done the gloss varnish on the interior, I'm hoping the light will shine around inside the aircraft and light everything up. So one more under the navigator's table, and then we'll move to where the mid-upper gunner would be. I've decided to wire the engines as well, so I'm running cables out to where the engines would be. I'm going to bring a motor in there, wires out and join there. The second engine to join on the same thing. So I'm just doing this wing now, feeding cables through, or wires through, it's hardly a cable. But yeah, just to, I want the engines running as well now. I've decided just go to full bifter. There's not much about. If we're going to put the effort in, let's put the effort in, that's what I say. Pull a bit of wire through, shove it through there. Just got to be careful because they're all the same wire, that I don't mix up the wings. Because the last thing I want is polarities and motors and engines and all that jazz not working properly. So just bend that over there. Now the wires are through. So now I should be able to, I just want to push that in there, push that down so it's tidy like the other one, and then push that together. There we go, that's together. Fuselage halves are together now. So let's cut that wire like that. Then what I'll do is, what I've done there, I've secured the wires inside the wing spar, I think it's called a wing spar, and tie them up with shorter lengths of wire, like a staple type thing, to keep them tidy and stop them from moving too much, so I can identify the pairs when I'm ready to put the engines on. Motors even, really, I suppose. So yeah, just going to do these off camera and then we can start assembling the wings. Cool. Pleased to say the fuselage is now together. All the wiring is completed for the internal lights and the supply to the motors. Both ends of cables are labelled. So all I've got to do now is make sure the LEDs definitely work, and then check the polarity on the motor, plus and minus, plus and minus, plus and minus. So all the propellers will spin the same way and the airflow will go backwards away from the aircraft, because, well, that's important to me. So yes, looking good. With my collection of small motors that I have, what I've noticed is they've got a little collar on there. And whilst it's a bit too small for the model, it does give me almost precise location for the motor to be centre. So what I'm going to do is, before I start building these engines, is into a little tiny blob either side of the motor housing, being very careful not to touch the shaft. Stick this part and then centralise it on the motor and then hold it there. Now again, I'm using Gorilla Glue because it's nice to position stuff and get it square. Motor's flush, that's brilliant. Make sure that it's square. Or centralised, I should say, really. Now when these go inside the engine cowlings, I will either side put some Humbrol filler so that motors will stay put, because that tiny amount of super glue isn't going to hold them in place. So just to make sure they're absolutely solid, I'll use some of that Humbrol stuff. So that should be on now. Yep, it's there. So get our faithful crocodile clip thing and then let that go off. And I've done one already. So I'll carry on with this, have all 4 motors ready, and then we'll start putting the engines together. Yes, so the glue's dried on one of them, so just to show you what I'm doing, if I put the motor front into that slot, oh crikey, get in there, that's it. You can see there's space around the motor, so I shall put filler in that to hide the whining noise in the motor itself, but also to secure it into place really firmly so it can't ever come out again unless you break the model. Right, so motor's set in, front cowlings on there. I'm not following instructions, by the way. This is just how I decided to build these. So using a cocktail stick, I'm going to take some Humbrol filler and then just, oh, a bit too much there, a little bit at a time, and just pack that motor in as best I can, just to get that. I'm going to use quite a bit because it's, I mean, just to square the motor up and to hold it in place. As I said, unless someone actually takes it apart. So yeah, it's all good. So now I'm going to thread the wires for the inboard motors to the outboard motors and do all the soldering and junctions in here. The reason why I'm doing it outside, like these two ends here, is I know that's positive, I know that's negative, and I'd rather do the soldering outside the model and not risk melting any surfaces or anything. So very carefully I'm going to take the wires and see if I can't thread them up inside the wing. There we go. Got it. There we go, we're through. So according to the instructions, it should just sit in there, which it does. But something about modern Airfix kits, they just seem to be really good fits now. There we go. I remember building these as a child and it was very loose fitting. Right, let's hold that in place. A little bit of Tamiya. Right, I'm just going to hold that in place now until it sets. The engine set in place. Bit of a tidy up. What a mess I made there. Second. Now what I'm going to do is, I'm going to have to solder these first. So if I can, as I said at the beginning of the video, my board's very inadequate now. So yes, I'm going to do the soldering and then fix. I might be able to get away with that actually. I might just get away with that. Oh, I can see. I'm going to have to put a hole in there to fish the wires through, because if you can see that on the camera or not, it sits flush and I won't be able to get the wires up. I think there's too much of it, there's enough gap there for it to happen. Oh, let's just put that up there like that. Sometimes you need a third hand, and unfortunately I haven't got one. Right. Oh no, I might get away with that without drilling holes. Superb. Right, okay. Let's see if I can just hold that in place then. Now the wires are there. Get that done. Get it in place. Yep, I think that's there. Ever faithful Tamiya. I prefer using the Revel glue because it's just less likely to give fingerprints, but for this sort of application, Tamiya is always the better of the two for a quick set. Again, I'll hold that in place off camera and then I'll do the soldering on the next shot. Take the positive and take the positive, run them parallel along each other, and then I'm going to do a wrap so that the joint has a good mechanical joint as well as electrical joint. I'm just going to roll them like that. It wouldn't pass aviation standards, to be honest, but I just want the joints inside the model to last. There's nothing worse than doing this and then you find a dry joint inside your model and it ruins your whole build. So I'm just going to make sure that that is a good joint. So just a blob of solder on there, just to seal it. Probably a bit too much solder, but never mind. As I said, it's not aviation standard. Right, do the same with the negative. Then I shall insulate, go to the end of the plane and just test again before I put these covers on. So to test the wiring and everything else, I've connected a battery pack to the 2 wires for the motors, which should feed electric up to these 2 fans. So I put a couple bits of tissue paper on the model. Hopefully we'll see some airflow. So, cross fingers, let's go. Yeah, we have airflow in the right direction. So I'm going to do the other side, and then we can button it all up, and I'll carry on with the turrets and build and tailplane and whatnot. Brilliant. All the motors are wired. As it happens, you may notice that there's a couple of open joints here. This is why I always test before I assemble. I had a wiring fault on this joint. Ended up with quite a blob of solder because I had to disconnect, reconnect, disconnect, reconnect 3 times. I found a break in the wire basically. Bit of a nuisance, but now it would appear we have 4 running Merlins. Woohoo! Oh, pedal fell off. Obviously they'll be glued on. And just to test the lights, yeah, all the lights are working as well. The reason why it's 2 circuits is because the inrush current of the motors on the same supply as the LEDs will blow the LEDs. They will go straight away. So that's why I've done 2 separate circuits. Just in case you're wondering, I learnt that one from college back in 1980-ish. So yeah, just want to clarify why I've got 2 circuits. But yep, so far so good. I'll tidy that up, put it back in, button her up, and then we'll carry on with the turrets and whatnot, tailplane, blah blah blah. Off camera, I've done some finishing touches. So I've smoothed out all the joint lines, tidied up the tailplane where they met there with a little bit of filler, tidied things up. Main cockpit glasses on and mast. Done the front bomb sight. Bomb bay doors are on. I must admit they were more difficult than I thought they'd be. They weren't as good fit as the rest of the model has been, but That could be my fault rather than Airfix themselves. So yes, now I'm going to build the 3 turrets. Then I shall foam stuff, or stuff foam really, into the turret hole, spray the plane, and then afterwards fit the turrets to complete. This is the rear gun turret, and I want crew in this Lancaster, so I've got this pilot. I can't remember which build it's from, and I'm going to put him in there. So I would imagine his legs have got to dangle through there somehow. Now looking at that, I reckon there's just enough room for me to sit in there. I might have to lose his legs, but he can always be kneeling. So I'm proposing I'm going to cut there, make a hole there, drop my figurine into there, or the pilot even, whatever, aircraft crew member, drop him into there, and then slot the gun carriage thing, whatever it is, gun mount, on top of his lap there. I think that might work. I might tell, I suppose. Let's get on with it. Rear gunner is complete, turrets together. You can see more detail from the rear, but I mean, I'm quite pleased with that. You can see his arms behind the gun stations. Going back to the mid-upper gunner, I've got another one. Cut his arms off. Now, this pilot figure has got the right headgear on. So, I'm thinking decapitation. So if I cut his head off, oh, he can now go, and I'm going to cut his head off, and that can go. Hopefully, a little bit of glue. After several attempts, I think I've got his head on. Actually, it's quite cool. I've got his head turned. Quite like that. Mid-upper gunner. Let's see if we can get his arms into the turret like I did the rear gunner. So a little blob of glue on his shoulder. Okay, get the which arm it is now, painted both sides. Silly daft ape, but it's that one. Oh, go grab him by there, rub it in there, and then settle it down onto there. I'm going to have to touch up his shoulder because that's obvious, but there's another arm in. Glue to the other side. Maybe the arm's too thick for the. Front turret with parts like this, where the sprue is thicker than the bit you're cutting off. What I tend to do is get my cutters, free it from the sprue first, and then laying it as flat as you can with a scalpel. Cut the sprue off that way. I've learnt this from having so many parts being snapped. Oh, I bent the guns a little bit, but they'll bend back into shape. That's not too bad. It's better than a snapped 303. And then just very gently just trim off the excess with a scalpel, ever so gently. After much fiddling and foul language, all 3 turrets are now done, figures are in. I've just got to stick the guns onto the rear turret, but I'll do that when the whole plane's together. They're bound to get knocked off before that. So yeah, had a few Tamiya incidents. I've got a fingerprint now I've got to clean up. But other than that, very pleased. Lancaster's ready to paint, so I'm going to do Humbrol 29, Humbrol 30, mask, and then do Humbrol 33, because I always do lighter colours, darker colours to darker colours, because it just seems to work that better that way. So, tested the airbrush, that's good. So, let's start on the spraying, I suppose.
Off camera, underneath the diorama, I've got a USB charge board with a 3.7 volt lithium ion battery. That's to power the motors. So that goes to the board, through the switch on this side, out the other side of the switch, along here, up to the pair that's detailed motor. LEDs I'm powering from a 2032 button battery. Basically the battery would outlast LEDs, I expect. Again, through the switch, up to the top, to the cables marked LED. I'll join the Lancaster wires to those and then stick the Lancaster diorama.
The wiring's done, and in addition I've added all the landing gear and everything else, the decals. It's got to the point now where it's just finishing touches on the model, turrets and propellers. With the propellers, mount them onto the model, the motor shaft and propeller has size difference. You can see that rattling around. So using the ever faithful Humbrol filler, take a cocktail stick. Because it's a gloopy, it's ideal for this. Little tiny squidge on the end of the cocktail stick, not too much. Put it into the hole for the prop, like that, as much as you can. Just get it in there as best as possible. Cotton bud, clean the excess off. You don't want the filler drying to the model. Like that. And then very slowly insert to the model and just hold there for a while. And then that should set around the motor shaft and hold the prop onto the metal as is. Just try and square it up a little tiny bit, not too much. Make sure there's a gap between the two, which there is on this one. There we go. Because it's gloopy, it'll hold it in place. There we go. So I'll carry on doing the other three, and then we'll do the turrets. One of my favourite bits, unmasking. I do like this. This is one of my most favourite bits of the model, is to unmask it. Mid upper turret. And pushing home. Whoops. There we go. Make sure it's square as possible. just want to turn the turret a little bit off centre because uniform's a bit boring to me. That's it. And then a little bit of Tamiya. Honestly, do not want to use too much of this. Just dab in there, just to seal it. It tends to bubble the paint if you use too much. Just in there, that's it. Just a bit under there. Now I want the turret to stay where it is, so I'm just going to do the same with the turret. That's it, that's enough, more than enough to hold that in place. Front turret. Again, I want him off centre. I do not want him all uniform. That way you can see the gunner better for the larger clear parts. And then we take this piece where it was drying, and then we fit that piece over there. Drop that into position. Oh Christ. There we go. Try and get the turret where I want it. Like that. And again, tiniest amount of Tamiya extra thin to hold that in place. And this is crucial now that there's no fingerprint marks. Rear turret without guns at the moment. I'm going to do the guns afterwards. I'm just going to put a little bit on the base of the turret and just place it into the plane. That's it, clicked in nicely. I'm just going to have him turning that way a little bit. Done. Well, I really enjoyed that build. The Airfix Lancaster went together well. I'm really pleased with the lights and the motors and the effects. So yes, if you like the video, please like it. And if you haven't done already, please subscribe. And I'll see you on the next edition. Cheers.